The e-bike industry in 2026 is honestly a mess. And we don't mean the bikes themselves, we mean the companies behind them. A recent industry survey showed that around 36% of e-bikes develop some kind of fault. We saw major battery fire incidents, bankruptcy filings, brands disappearing overnight, and customers getting stranded with bikes nobody can repair anymore. And that's the real issue with e-bikes today. So in this video, we're ranking the biggest e-bike brands of 2026 from S tier all the way down to C tier. The brands you should seriously avoid. If you ask hardcore e-bike enthusiasts what the engineering benchmark is, this brand comes up almost immediately. Muller basically represents what happens when a real cycling company builds an e-bike instead of a Silicon Valley startup trying to cosplay as one. Their bikes are expensive. We're talking $4,000 to $12,000. But honestly, once you ride one, you understand where the money went. The Bosch CX motor systems are incredibly refined. The dual battery setups can reach up to 1,250 watt-hours, and their real-world range is genuinely among the best in the industry. And unlike many trendy direct-to-consumer brands, they actually think long-term. Parts availability years later is excellent, especially in Europe. Their cargo bikes and full suspension models feel overbuilt in the best possible way. Now the downsides. Price is obviously massive. These bikes are financially out of reach for most people, and some dual battery models weigh over 35 kilograms, which is honestly insane. But in terms of reliability, engineering, and ownership confidence, this is S tier for a reason. Specialized is probably the best example of a mainstream bike company successfully mastering e-bikes, and their biggest advantage is the Bros Motor partnership. Their custom-tuned Bros systems feel incredibly natural, smoother, and more bike-like than many competitors. It doesn't feel like a machine dragging you forward. It feels like your legs suddenly became superhuman. That's why the Turbo Levo and Turbo Vado lines have developed such a loyal following over the years. But the real strength here is ecosystem support. Specialized has a massive global dealer network, so if something breaks, you're not begging customer support through email for 3 weeks. Any decent bike shop can usually help you. Their Mission Control app is also one of the few genuinely useful e-bike apps. It lets riders fine-tune power delivery without turning the experience into gimmicky tech nonsense. Now yes, the bikes are expensive, and older Turbo Levo generations had some battery issues around 2018 to 2020. But overall, Specialized remains one of the safest long-term bets in the entire market. Trek deserves credit for doing something surprisingly rare in this industry. They avoided getting too clever. Instead of building risky proprietary systems, Trek leaned heavily into Bosch across most of their lineup. And honestly, that was the correct decision. Because when you buy Bosch, you're buying into one of the most proven motor ecosystems in the world. Parts availability is strong, serviceability is excellent, and there's real confidence that support will still exist years later. And Trek's dealer network is absolutely massive, especially in the United States. That matters way more than flashy marketing. The Rail eMTB lineup has built a very solid long-term ownership reputation, and frame quality overall is consistently strong. Now the criticism? Trek can sometimes feel a little conservative. They're slower to adopt innovations compared to brands like Specialized, and occasionally the pricing feels high for the component spec you're getting. But if your priority is reliability, support, and low ownership drama, Trek is one of the smartest purchases you can make in 2026. Tern is probably the most honest cargo-focused e-bike brand in the industry. They don't cut corners with weird in-house motors or flashy marketing gimmicks. Most of their bikes use Bosch or Shimano systems, and that decision alone immediately gives them credibility. The GSD and HSD cargo lines are especially respected because these bikes are actually engineered for real family use. Groceries, kids, heavy loads, daily commuting. Not just Instagram photo shoots pretending to be utility bikes. The frame rigidity and load handling are genuinely impressive. And unlike many direct-to-consumer brands, Tern bikes have years of real-world ownership data behind them now. The downside is accessibility. Dealer networks are still limited in some rural regions, especially outside Europe. And these bikes are definitely not cheap. They're also heavier than some competitors because they're built more like tanks than lightweight commuters. But overall, if you want a serious utility e-bike built for long-term ownership, Tern absolutely deserves A tier. eBike deserves respect simply because they helped pioneer the modern eMTB category. Long before electric mountain bikes became mainstream, eBike was already experimenting with aggressive geometry, suspension systems, and trail-focused motor integration. And that experience still shows. Their Bosch and Yamaha-equipped bikes generally ride very well, especially off-road. Another major advantage is financial stability. eBike operates under the Axel Group umbrella, which gives buyers more long-term confidence compared to smaller startup brands constantly burning venture capital. But honestly, the brand has started feeling a little stagnant lately. Competitors like Specialized and Trek have pushed innovation faster, especially with lighter systems and more refined ride feel. And in North America, dealer support has definitely shrunk over the past few years. Some mid-range models also started showing more component cost-cutting than buyers expected, especially with brakes and drivetrain choices. Still, for riders wanting proven European eMTB heritage with stable motor ecosystems, eBike remains a very solid option overall. Lectric might honestly be the most transparent, value-focused brand in the American e-bike market right now. And that matters more than people realize. A lot of budget brands exaggerate range numbers, overstate motor performance, and hide limitations behind marketing buzzwords. Lectric doesn't really do that. They openly sell hub motorbikes as affordable, practical transportation, instead of pretending they compete with premium mid-drive systems. The XP lineup especially has become incredibly popular because the value proposition is hard to ignore. For under $1,500, you're getting decent utility, acceptable build quality, and surprisingly competent customer support compared to many direct-to-consumer competitors. Now, yes, these are still cadence sensor hub motorbikes. If you live in steep terrain or want high-performance riding feel, this probably isn't your platform. And because there's no true dealer network, servicing usually falls on the owner. Long-term durability beyond the 5-year mark is also still relatively unproven. But for budget-conscious buyers, Lectric has earned its reputation far more honestly than most competitors. Gazelle feels like the opposite of modern startup culture. And honestly, that's exactly why people trust them. This is a Dutch company with over a century of cycling experience, and you can immediately feel that commuter-first philosophy in their bikes. Everything feels practical and mature. Integrated lights, fenders, racks, comfortable geometry. These aren't treated like expensive accessories. They're simply standard because the company actually understands daily transportation. Most Gazelle models use Bosch or Shimano systems, which instantly improves reliability and serviceability. And because they're backed by Pawn Holdings, buyers have much more confidence that the company will still exist years from now. The downside is excitement. These bikes are not flashy. They don't target aggressive mountain biking audiences or speed-focused riders. And outside Europe, especially in North America, dealer presence is still limited. Pricing can also feel slightly high for commuter-focused bikes compared to some cheaper direct-to-consumer options. But if you want an e-bike that quietly works every single day without drama, Gazelle absolutely deserves serious respect. Aventon is honestly one of the most frustrating brands in the market because the hardware has improved significantly, but the support experience still scares people away. On paper, a lot of their newer bikes look genuinely competitive. Torque sensors became more common, hydraulic brakes are now widely available across the lineup, and overall ride quality is much better than it was a few years ago. But customer service complaints continue showing up constantly, and not small complaints either. We're talking about users with month-old bikes reporting bearing failures, controller issues, or electrical problems, and then getting stuck in long warranty battles. That creates trust issues, because an e-bike is fundamentally an electronics product. Eventually, something will fail, and when it does, the company response matters just as much as the bike itself. Their range claims also tend to feel overly optimistic in real-world testing. So overall, Aventon isn't terrible, far from it. But you should only buy one if you're comfortable handling potential service headaches yourself. Ride One Up is a classic example of a company delivering impressive specifications at aggressive pricing. And to be fair, some of their bikes genuinely punch above their weight. The Prodigy model using a Bafang mid-drive system is especially interesting because mid-drives at that price point are still relatively uncommon. You also get hydraulic brakes and surprisingly decent components for the money. Pre-sale communication from the company is generally better than many other direct-to-consumer brands too. But the long-term ownership concerns are still real. Bafang systems can be inconsistent under sustained heavy load, especially during steep hill climbs where overheating complaints have appeared repeatedly in owner communities. And once the warranty period ends, support becomes much thinner. There's also no major dealer ecosystem acting as a safety net if something serious fails. So Ride One Up makes sense for riders who want strong performance per dollar and understand the trade-offs. But if you prioritize maximum reliability and stress-free ownership above all else, there are safer brands higher on this list. Velotric is one of the more interesting newer brands because so far they've avoided many of the disaster patterns we've seen from struggling e-bike startups. Their bikes actually offer decent value. Torque sensors are becoming standard. The component choices are surprisingly respectable for the pricing. And importantly, the company has been taking battery certification more seriously than many low-cost competitors. That already puts them ahead of a huge portion of the market. Early ownership feedback has also been relatively positive overall. But the problem is simple. We still don't truly know how these bikes will hold up after 3 or 4 years of heavy use. That long-term data simply doesn't exist yet. And because the motor systems are still largely proprietary, buyers remain dependent on the company surviving and continuing support long-term. So Velotric feels promising, maybe even very promising. Rad Power Bikes honestly became the cautionary tale of the entire e-bike industry. At one point, they were one of the biggest names in the business. They helped push e-bikes into mainstream American culture and built a huge customer base. But the deeper problems eventually caught up with them. Battery safety issues became impossible to ignore, including dozens of documented fire incidents and massive property damage reports. And the company's response seriously damaged public trust. They reportedly argued that a full recall would bankrupt the company, and then eventually filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy anyway. That's catastrophic for customer confidence. The bigger issue is that Rad relied heavily on proprietary systems, meaning many local bike shops couldn't properly repair their bikes without company support. Now owners are stuck in uncertainty regarding parts, warranties, and long-term servicing. Historically, Rad mattered a lot for industry growth. But in 2026, buying into that ecosystem carries serious risk. Sondors feels like one of those companies that got trapped by its own hype. A few years ago, they generated massive excitement through crowdfunding campaigns, flashy marketing, and ambitious promises, especially around the Metacycle electric motorcycle project. But the reality eventually collapsed underneath all of that momentum. Orders reportedly went unfulfilled, inventory became inconsistent, and financial instability started becoming impossible to ignore. At this point, many products are constantly out of stock. Support confidence is extremely weak, and buyers genuinely don't know how long the company can continue operating. And that uncertainty is deadly in the e-bike industry. Because again, these bikes depend heavily on proprietary electronics, controllers, and battery systems. If the company disappears, owners can quickly lose access to replacement parts and warranty support entirely. There was a moment when Sondors looked like an exciting disruptor, but in 2026, it feels much more like a warning about what happens when aggressive marketing grows faster than sustainable business infrastructure. Juiced Bikes is honestly one of the saddest stories in this industry because people genuinely like the products. Before shutting down, the company had developed a loyal community around its powerful hub motorbikes and fun riding experience. A lot of owners praised the frame quality and overall performance for the money. But then the company abruptly collapsed in 2024, and that instantly stranded thousands of customers without reliable support. Now yes, Lectric acquired the brand in 2025 and there's discussion about potentially reviving it. But as of now, the future still feels uncertain. And uncertainty is the exact thing you should avoid when buying an e-bike. Because even if the bike itself is mechanically solid, replacement batteries, controllers, and proprietary components become major concerns once official support disappears. If Lectric successfully rebuilds the ecosystem, maybe Juiced eventually earns another chance. But today, buying older legacy Juiced models without guaranteed parts support is simply too risky for most people. Probably the most dangerous category in the entire e-bike market. And the scary part is that many first-time buyers can't even tell the difference between these brands and legitimate companies. You've probably seen them on Amazon, random names like Anchir, Nocto, and dozens of nearly identical brands selling 750 watts fat tire bikes for absurdly low prices. The photos look convincing, the specs sound incredible, the reviews often seem decent. But behind the scenes, many of these companies are basically temporary shell brands importing generic OEM bikes with little to no long-term support structure. Some disappear entirely within a year. Battery certification is also a massive concern here. And when you're dealing with large lithium batteries inside apartments, garages, or homes, that's not something you gamble on. If the controller fails, if the battery dies, or if something catches fire, you often have nowhere to turn. No dealer network, no real warranty, no repair ecosystem. This is the segment where cheap pricing can become genuinely dangerous. So that's our take on best e-bike brands of 2026. Now we would like to hear from you. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Hit like and subscribe for more exciting content like this. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.